Bom, 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 bom.
Dit is niet wat het lijkt op het eerste gezicht.
Bom, 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 bom.
Dit is geen Nerdland, maar overzicht.
Bom, 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 bom.
Maar wel een gratis extra aflevering.
Dit is een Nerdland.
Special. Een aanvulling.
Met uw gastheer Lieven.
Oh yeah.
A good day, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Nerdland podcast, and a very special episode because with us today is Mr. Walter Isaacson. Good day, Mr. Isaacson.
Good day. Great talking to you again.
Well, we are so happy that you join us here because you have written the latest Musk biography. Not only this, you actually were part of his life for 2 years. You could follow him around. You were there in his personal lives during meetings. We have been talking about Mr. Musk's projects every month in our podcast. We are so curious. What is he like?
Well, there are many different versions of Elon Musk, many different personalities. And sometimes in the middle of the day, he'll be in engineering mode and he'll be focused like an absolute laser on maybe a leak in the Raptor engine under Starship, or a problem with unprotected left turns on full self-driving. And then sometimes he gets inspirational. He'll talk about the need to get to Mars or to have sustainable energy. Sometimes he's funny and giddy, watching Monty Python skits on his phone. But like his father, he could become suddenly a dark personality, almost as if a switch gets flipped, and like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in the story.
And is this triggered by something?
Sometimes it's triggered by somebody telling him you can't do something. Sometimes it just comes on. You can see it. His girlfriend, Claire Boucher, known as Grimes, I remember being at dinner one night at a restaurant in Austin with 4 other people. And she looked over at me and she said, demon mode. And I said, I couldn't see it. But then she knew it. She knew it was about to happen. And about 10 seconds later, he just got really stony and cold and angry.
Did you see the whole range of what? Because you say that he's a lot of personalities, lots of different sides. Are you confident that you saw the whole range of who Elon Musk is?
Yeah.
Because he looks, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I spent 2 years, and some days I'd be there starting at 9 in the morning and we'd go until 2 in the morning. And I watched him cycle through a range of personalities. And of course, I talked to more than 150 people in doing this book. And I could see the different moods. But the big thing is when he switches into demon mode, that's when it really is an abrupt switch in personality.
Is it like a temper? Because I've read the book. You give us an insight in the complicated personality that he is, and this demon mode comes on and off every now and then. Is it like a temper, like we have a temper sometimes, or is it more profound than this, how he switches?
It is deeper and darker and more profound, and his temper is not expressed by raising his voice or getting physical or screaming at people. It's cold. It is almost a monotone. And when he comes out of it, sometimes after an hour, sometimes after 4 or 5 hours, he hardly remembers what he said or what he did when he was in demon mode.
I have read the book, so we meet a man there who has an enormous drive, who, as you said earlier, has a real insight in the small details of engineering of his company, which I think is extraordinary, and who is also a troubled mind. All these things flow together. Can you take him apart? Can Elon Musk still be the successful man he is without any of these traits that he has?
Well, it's a good question. As you know from reading the book, that's one of the themes of the book, which is we would love it if we could have an impulse control button so Musk wouldn't tweet out impulsive, immature, nasty things. And we would love it if he didn't go dark every now and then. But if you take out the dark strands, are you going to be left with the same fabric? Or is it all woven together as part of a single cloth? Would a Musk with an impulse control key be somebody who'd be shooting the rockets up to Mars when nobody else is? Would a Musk who is bound or guarded, would he be the one who goes to the brink of bankruptcy many times to get us into the era of electric vehicles? So I think the answer is, as Shakespeare said, we're all molded out of our faults. And you can't say, let's just remove all the faults of Elon and imagine what he would be like if he was just light and cheerful and never immature and never impulsive.
That was one of my main questions. Throughout the years, I've observed Musk's behavior, and of course, you got the good, you got the bad. I always wondered, the richest man in the world, the man who has the access to the best experts, the best therapists, I don't know. Why isn't there, because he doesn't allow them probably, why aren't there people who are saying, okay, now you're in demon mode, we're going to try and solve this, we're going to try and make this more workable? You say that there is some kind of method to the madness and that the madness is required to do what he has to do, but isn't there any pushback from the people who surround him, his family, his friends?
I mean, if you see in the book, there's so many stories of people like John McNeil, who was president of Tesla, or so many others who, when he would get catatonic and be lying on the floor with the lights off, going through a bipolar or manic depressive incident, or going through demon mode, would just try to pull him back, would try to make him snap out of it. But Musk never wanted to do therapy. He doesn't have a psychiatrist. And that's just part of who he is. Now, yes, John McNeil, who was, as I said, president of Tesla and used to try to intervene, he'd say the question you've just asked, which is this a price you got to pay in order to have a genius?
Did you ever feel the need to intervene? Because I know you're a biographer, you're more like a sort of objective bystander, like in nature documentaries.
No, I never intervened. No. I am trying to be very objective, and I stand back. Occasionally, I would ask him questions, and occasionally he would go really bad into demon mode and just be berating for an hour somebody in the conference room or standing in front of him. And I'd be standing there taking notes. And I think, well, maybe like Heisenberg would say about the particle, by observing it, I'm going to influence its position or trajectory. But no, he never seemed to care that I was taking notes.
And when you question his behavior, just asking him, why did you do this? Or maybe slightly criticizing him in the objective way that you do, how does he react? Can he cope with it?
Well, a couple of times I'd say, why did you do that to Andy Krabs? When he just chewed the guy out for a couple of hours after on a late Friday night when there weren't enough people working on the Starship launch pad. And in that instance, Musk would hardly remember he did it. He'd say, well, I give people feedback, but I don't remember what you're talking about. And you'll see Milan Kundera in the book, who does robotics at Tesla, gets chewed out, and afterwards, a few weeks later, confronts Musk. Musk has no memory of it. But every now and then, when I would ask him questions about it, he'd say, well, you have a lot of empathy. You always care about the feelings of the people in front of you. And that may be a good thing, but it's not something that will make you disruptive. It's not something that'll make a really powerful company. Because sometimes having too much empathy for the people around you means you care about them, but not the larger mission. And maybe you're being selfish. Maybe you just want them to like you. And so he would tell me that if you have too much empathy, it perhaps is a selfishness where you want everybody to like you, but you're not willing to do what it takes to make a really tough company.
That maybe takes us to another aspect that you touch in the book that we haven't mentioned yet. It's his, well, you could call it hero complex, but for me, it's more he thinks in big missions. He builds rockets because he wants humanity to live on Mars. He started Neuralink because he wants humans to connect to artificial intelligence. Is this one of the things that he needs to put this much effort and drive in it, to have this big goal in the distance?
Yes. When he was a kid, he had no friends. He was on the autism spectrum. He got beaten up all the time. So he'd sit in the corner of the bookstore or library, and he'd read science fiction and comic books. And he loved the X-Men comics. He said they were trying to save the world, but they wore their underpants on the outside, so they looked ridiculous. But at least they were trying to save the world. And he said that he got 3 big missions coming out of that period as a kid. One is that we had to explore space. We had to become multiplanetary, go to Mars. Number 2, we had to make energy on this planet sustainable. And the 3rd mission is we have to make our robots safe. We have to make sure artificial intelligence is helpful, not harmful. And those are the 3 missions. And I thought for a while he was just talking about them, and he was, the type of pontificating you do on a podcast, but he'd say it so often, late at night, over and over, that I came to believe that he really felt he was driven by those 3 missions.
I have the feeling from reading the book and the time you also spent next to him on the factory floors. These big missions for him, they're not just a TED Talk. They're not just this inspirational talk. He is really there on the factory floor working with the smallest details of the process. Isn't that exceptional for a CEO or for an owner of a company?
He believes that if you really sweat the details, the rest of the things will follow. And he also believes that most big companies, even Steve Jobs, when he ran Apple, they care about designing the product, but they don't care about manufacturing. And he says that if you're really going to get to Mars, if you're really going to get to an era of electric vehicles, you got to care about the manufacturing of the product. So he will spend time sleeping, alongside the factory floor assembly line. He'll make sure his engineers and designers have their desks facing that assembly line. And he says it's like Napoleon on the battlefield. If Napoleon's there swinging his sword at a particular part of the battlefield, then the rest of the battlefield will follow suit. But he's got to be there late at night, taking care of details.
Yeah, he's actually there. He's looking at the process. He's making it more and more efficient. And well, there's one quote that I really like that you wrote is, you have to build the machine that builds the machine. So he's not just working on the car, the Tesla, he's building the factory that builds the machine, also because he needs it in his constant startup mode. He needs fast production in order not to go bankrupt, I guess.
Well, almost every car company, and certainly every car company that created electric vehicles, went bankrupt in American history, and probably true a bit in Europe as well. And he says the only way you don't go bankrupt is you make the machine that makes the machine. You make the factories, and you figure out how to not just make a Tesla, but how to make 1 million Teslas real fast in a year. And so that becomes his driving force.
Is it something that is overlooked by people who adore Musk for his vision, that he's mainly about, apart from the technological genius, mainly about manufacturing and about making this more efficient?
Yeah, I didn't realize that until I spent so much time with him, that he spends 80% of his mental energy on figuring out the assembly line and the factory. And a lot of people have a lot of vision for how to make an electric car, or even vision on how to make a rocket. But vision without execution is just hallucination. And that's why Musk focuses on the execution.
So as I've mentioned already, we have 2 teams on our podcast. We have Team Musk and Team Musk Skepsis. Now, if there's one thing you take away from your book and your insights, it's that it's completely nuanced. You can't be all pro. You can't be all against. Now, I think when Team Musk and Musk Skepsis started 4 or 5 years ago, our main question was how much of the accomplishment of the rockets and the cars is his, and how much is it of the team he puts together? Is he just a really good team leader, or is he also the technological genius? Is he also the engineer? I think that was the main question.
He does a lot of the engineering himself. He has a feel for the material properties of different things, such as stainless steel or inconel or carbon fiber. But he also has some true geniuses like Mark Jankosa on the SpaceX team, or Drew Baglino on the Tesla team, who have a feel for batteries, anodes and cathodes. But I would say that Musk's biggest contribution is not on marketing, it's not on finance, it's not even on being a good leader in terms of human relations. His biggest contribution is that he actually knows the engineering and cares about it.
He knows the factory all the way down to the details on the factory floor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You write about his youth. Again, when it comes to nuance, when it comes to understanding where his sometimes very strange and maybe even appalling behavior comes from, you write about his youth in South Africa. I think it gives a lot of insight in the troubled mind he became. One thing that stands out for me is the Veldschool, the field school, the survival camp that he was sent to become tougher. When I read how it works, young people given not enough food and having to fight over their food, I think today this would be completely illegal, probably.
Yeah, I think he probably feels that we've gotten soft nowadays. But when he went to the field school or the wilderness camp, the first time he went, he was small and scrawny and socially awkward. And he just get beat up because they encouraged the kids to beat each other up to take the food.
Encouraged them to beat each other up. Actually,
Right.
that
and
situation.
He lost 10 pounds. I mean, it was, and people died. And they used to say, hey, don't be like the kid who died last year.
Sure.
And Musk said the second time he went, he was bigger. And he just learned to punch people in the nose as hard as he could. He said they could still beat me up sometimes, but at least I'd punch them as hard in the nose as I could. And you see that today. You see that in the past month or two, where he's fighting Bob Iger at Disney. And for reasons that aren't very good, he just decides to punch as hard as he could people in the nose.
That was one of my questions. If you see, like, you stopped following Musk around the time of the first Falcon launch, or what was it?
Starship. Yeah.
Starship launch, sorry. Is there one of the moments in his last few, let's say in his last year, where you thought, oh, I really wanted to be in that room again with him right now, just to get a new insight? Or you're like, this biography is finished. I've written what I wanted about the guy. I think
the biography tells you all you need to know to understand even what Musk is going to do next month, not just last month. And certainly I was with him all the way through this summer. Yeah. So I was with him when he does moderation and he turns Twitter into X and allows, Donald Trump back on. There's nothing he's done in the past month or two that's in any way any different from the Elon Musk I tried to write about in this book. So, he's going to do a whole lot of other things, but I don't feel I have to be in the room every day to understand him. This book should allow you to understand him.
You don't miss it. Or is that not the right? No.
I mean, there's an excitement of being around him, but it's also unnerving. And I try to write the book with very fast-paced, short chapters with terse prose, where I just do a narrative that runs real fast, because I want you to get a sense of what it's like being next to him. I try to do that in the drive and short chapters and short paragraphs and sentences in the book.
Did he proofread the book?
No, one of the deals I had at the very beginning was you have to give me total access, but you don't get to approve the book. You don't get to read the book. I'm not going to send it to you in advance. And when I saw him right as the book was coming out, he didn't have a copy, although reviewers had copies, because I said, I'm not going to send it to you in advance. He said, well, should I read it? And I said, no, you shouldn't read it. I was sort of half joking. But nowadays, in the past few weeks, when people say, what'd you think of the book? He just sort of said jokingly, well, Walter told me not to read it, so I won't say anything.
Did you choose him or did he ask you to write the book?
I think we had a mutual friend, and he had talked to both of us about doing it. So he and I got on the phone, Musk and myself, and we talked for 2 hours. And at one point, I said, look, I'm not going to do this book. I don't want to do it based on 10 or 15 interviews. I want to do it based on 2 years of being with you at all times that I want to. And he said, okay. That surprised me. And then I said what I just told you, and you don't get to read it in advance. And he went, okay. And I went down after that conversation. I was with a group of friends, and all of a sudden they're buzzing and say, So what happened? They said, well, Elon just sent out a tweet saying Walter's writing my biography.
Of course he did, yeah.
Very impulsive once again. But it's an important point because when people see me read the book, a question that I often get is it just praise? Because they think,
oh no,
Elon Musk ordered, with all his billions, he ordered a biography that is all praise, but it's completely different. It's you really try to see all the sides of him and both sides of this personality.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to do the truth, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I wanted to show all sides of his personality. I wanted people who absolutely hate him to say, wow, he's a little bit more amazing than I thought. And I wanted people who think that he's, are total fanboys and thinks that he's just a total genius to say, no, it's more complicated. He's darker than I thought. Because we're all human, and Elon, more than most of us, has strengths and weaknesses. And my goal was always to keep in mind what will be interesting, informative, and true to the reader. And the only person I was trying to please was the reader. So it's got the good sides and the bad sides of Elon. And more importantly, it shows how they're interwoven and how they're related.
It's a naughty question. Are you still in contact with him?
Not much. I mean, I've run, and since the book came out, I've been been with him in the same conference once. And then I was in Austin for the Texas Book Festival and was with a group of people at a birthday dinner, and he was there. But we only occasionally have emails or texts back and forth.
He's a busy man, of course. But
yeah, and I'm not his buddy. I'm his biographer. Yeah. I'm not his pal.
Oh, well,
I've got another naughty question about being a biographer. You said like there was some mutual contact between you and Elon Musk, and you've written biographies of the greats of the earth. Are there any people that you've declined writing a biography about, and why? Probably a question you might not want to answer. That's certainly fine by me.
Sure. But I'll answer. There have been about 15 people, usually wealthy, successful people, who call me up and say, I'll pay you money to write my biography. But I don't do biography. I don't get paid to do biographies. I don't. And I don't do it because somebody's willing to pay me. So I tell them it's insulting. And I've said no. I'm looking around for my next subject, but it's not going to be because somebody wants me to do their biography.
Trump hasn't called yet.
Yeah, no, that was not going to happen.
I would like you to write about me. Yeah, we'll see.
He did the impression. Oh,
yes,
no.
I'm so sorry. Shouldn't do it again. We have talked about Musk on the podcast. There were quite often events that we as outsiders were looking at and didn't understand. A few of them are in the book with all the insights from the other side. And I think two important ones, and it's all about his personality and about how we try to figure out, are we fans or not? What do we like about him? What don't we like about him? Two important moments for us were two tweets, of course. One, the conspiracy about Nancy Pelosi's husband, that he retweeted the conspiracy that he had taken a male sex worker to his home. And the other one was the prosecute Fauci tweet, which kind of hit me emotionally in a way, because we were true Musk fans, and then suddenly he tweets something like prosecute Fauci. I had no idea. Does he mean it? Is it a joke? Where does it come from? But you were there in the room, or you have the entire story of what happened in the book.
His father, at the beginning of doing this book, his mother, May, who had divorced the abusive father, early on, said the danger for Elon is that he becomes his father. And his father goes into these dark modes where he's paranoid, conspiratorial, and will just buy all these dumb conspiracy or fringe theories that the election was stolen from Biden or that Fauci is a criminal. And even though Elon doesn't talk to his father, you see Elon going down these rabbit holes every now and then feeling bad about it afterwards. I mean, he deletes the tweets on Fauci. He apologizes. Same with the Pelosi tweets. Same with the ones where he tweeted some very complicated theory that people thought was anti-Semitic, but it's so complicated it's hard to even, about how liberal progressive groups are encouraging migrants to come in, and so that's leading to Palestinian anti-Semitic. I mean, it was just a dumb thing, and he retweeted that, and that's what he does late at night, and he regrets it, and certainly, people who want to be his fans regret it.
But it's a bit of a paradox for me that someone who can look at an engine, a rocket engine, and can understand the engineering and the details and everything there, that still he can go down the rabbit hole of a conspiracy theory, being so rational.
I find it problematic, difficult, makes me very uncomfortable. And there'll be times when, most of the time when he's talking to me or others, he's very moderate. He talks about the need of people in both parties to come together, and we need centrist policies. But there are times when he goes into a dark place and he suddenly is embracing what I think are truly wacky conspiracy theories and things like prosecute Fauci. And it's not new. I mean, he did it in 2018, got in trouble with calling a British cave diver a pedophile.
Yeah.
So this, his friend Antonio Gracias was traveling with him once and tried to take his phone and locked it into the hotel room safe and put in a code so Musk couldn't get it out because he didn't want Musk to tweet late at night. And Musk called the hotel security at 3 a.m. He took it out and started tweeting. It's a addiction he has that's connected to these dark conspiracy theories that sometimes take over his mind.
As a fan of what he does technologically, I keep hoping that this will go away or get better. When I read your book, I see that Kimball, his brother, really talks to him like, you have to stop this. The damage is huge. Of course, when you're this wealthy and powerful, the lever on your flaws is huge. But then I think yesterday or 2 days ago, he had an interview with Alex Jones and with Andrew Tate. So tell me, should I give up my hope and just accept that it's going to be this complicated forever?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I like it. I like the amazing successes he's had. But as the book shows you, he's dark and he's complicated at times. And it's been that way. And it hasn't gotten much better. In fact, it's no better now than it was in 2018 when he was doing it, or even before. The only big difference is now that he owns Twitter, things get even more amplified.
Yeah.
But Twitter's the worst possible flamethrower to put in his hands because he has no impulse control and he sends out these tweets. So there'll be periods up until a week or two ago, he had been pretty quiet and hadn't done much. But in the past week, or 2 weeks maybe, he's gone back into those rabbit holes of conspiracy theories. And I suspect 10 years from now, people say he's still doing it.
Do you think that he wields too much geopolitical power just as a concept? He's the richest man in the world. He owns a lot of the most important companies when it comes to space travel, when it comes to military applications. Is it wise to have so much power and so much influence concentrated on one man who is, as we all are, flawed? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it's unwise. I think it's
Yeah.
bad that he has too much power and too much influence. And in the book, I try to deal with many layers of that. The very first layer is how come he has so much power? Well, because everybody else who's been launching satellites can't get satellites into orbit, and he's gotten 5,000. So he has Starlink, which gave him great power in the Ukraine war. His satellites work. He's the only person who's been able to build rocket ships that can send astronauts into space and then land upright and be reused. So how come Boeing, NASA, the European Space Agencies, others haven't been able to make reusable rockets or haven't been able to recreate the internet in outer space? And how come Ford and General Motors haven't been able to do electric vehicles? And the new power he has that people haven't noticed much is the government here in the US was helping to create a charging network for electric vehicles. But the chargers that they were using and the standard they were using was so crappy that nowadays Ford and General Motors have decided they're going to go on the Tesla charging network, which means he's controlling the
Yes.
EV charging network. Now, in Europe, you're trying to stop it, but with all due respect, you can sort of stop it maybe through regulation. But the EV charging network that the governments there or people there are building are horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
So
And-
he has true accomplishments that
Yes.
brought him his wealth.
well, it's why he controls the internet and outer space and the charging networks and the launches of rockets and got us in the EVs. Now, that doesn't mean he should have that so much power. But question one you got to ask is, how come other people can't get it right? They don't take risks. They don't know how to do engineering. I think that he should not have so much power. That's why we have regulators. He should be regulated. And secondly, when he had the power to decide to allow the Ukrainians to use Starlink to attack Crimea or not, that was too much power for one person. And even though I don't give him advice, when he was telling me about it that night, I said, have you talked to the U.S. military? Have you talked to General Mark Milley, who runs the Joint Chiefs? And he did end up talking to those people, and he gave up voluntarily power over some of the Starlinks so that the U.S. military and the CIA now has power over it. And he said, how did I get into this war? I didn't ask for this much power. I made Starlink so people could watch Netflix movies and chill and play video games, but nobody else can seem to make a communication system, so I've got this much power.
The method that got him here, all these accomplishments, how much of it is rational decision? I mean, when he looks at an assembly line, he makes rational decisions. If I do this, things will improve. And how much of this is his personality, the fact that he is addicted to urgency and to crisis? Maybe some of his decisions are not rational decisions. I want to make things go faster, but just because of his personality, it ended up that way.
Well, I think that's an important point. A lot of the good engineering decisions he makes are because he understands that when everybody else is saying we can't use stainless steel to build the Starship rocket, he explains you could do it in stainless steel. It won't weigh more. But part of it, and this is where he gets both passionate but dark, is he has a fierce sense of urgency. When he took over Twitter, he fired 85% of the people and said it's just too relaxed of a culture. They all go to yoga studios and drink artisanal coffee. I want them working around the clock. And I remember one night on the Starship launch pad, he went into demon mode. It was Friday night, late at night, because there weren't enough people working. And the guy there says, well, we don't have a launch schedule. And he orders that they bring in hundreds of people from Florida and California so that for the next 6 days, they can stack the rocket with some urgency, even though there was a launch schedule. So that sense of urgency, what he calls a surge, also helps him get stuff done.
And do you think at that point he makes a rational decision, I have to bring a sense of urgency to this launch pad to improve things? Or is it just that his feeling, his unease of things going too slow kind of makes him do it regardless of what he thinks?
I think it's his unease when he sees things too comfortable. He doesn't like comfort.
Yeah.
He doesn't relax.
Well,
And if everybody's being too comfortable, I've watched him one at a time do a surge on the rocket ships, do a surge on the solar roof installations. And I think he's just driven to drama. And that makes him a hard person to be around. But as he's doing it, he'll say, we'll never get to Mars unless we have a fierce sense of urgency. And most people burn out or quit. But a lot of them say, this is the most important thing I could be doing in my life. And they don't mind working through the weekend to surge a rocket stacking.
one of the first questions that I wrote down after finishing your book is he ever happy?
No, he's not ever very happy.
Really?
And the weird thing is, it sounds contradictory, I don't think he likes happiness.
Okay.
You know, I'm not sure he'd be happy to be happy.
Because it's comfort and it's calm.
Yeah, I think as one of his wives said, he associates drama and pain with childhood and childhood love. And Kimball says he's a drama magnet. And he should have been really happy at the beginning of 2022 when I was been working on the book. Everybody else had gotten out of the rocket business. He made rockets that could land and be reused. He had made 1 million Teslas when GM and Ford were getting out of the business. He'd become the richest person on earth, the Financial Times Person of the Year. I said, are you happy? He said, no. And that's when he started buying up Twitter. He said, I don't like to just sit there and savor success.
You have written many biographies about Da Vinci, about Einstein, about Jobs, also about Kissinger and Franklin. But for us, I think Einstein, Jobs, Da Vinci, and Jennifer Doudna for our theme are very important people. Is there a line? Do you see a recipe to the genius, or is it just completely different methods and lives every time?
Well, I do try to write about geniuses. And as you do on this show, you know that genius doesn't come from just being smart. You have to think different. You have to be imaginative, be creative. You got to think out of the box. Steve Jobs' phrase was, think different. And so they're all willing to be disruptive and think different. There's not one simple recipe. Otherwise, I could have just written one book saying the 12 lessons to, success or genius or leadership. Ben Franklin and Jennifer Doudna were very nurturing people they brought people together. Steve Jobs and Elon Musk are very driven people who can pull people apart. But in general, they're all people who are driven by a sense of higher mission, not by money. And they have a passion for making even the parts you can't see beautiful, which is what Steve Jobs did.
So, Hetty, that's very good news. Jennifer Doudna, I think, especially for you as a geneticist, absolute hero, came up with the CRISPR technology. You can do great things and still be a nice person, Hetty. We have to remember this.
And that was the point of that book, is that whenever she hires people into her lab or into her companies, she gathers all the people on the team to make sure everybody feels comfortable with them. She wants people to feel comfortable at work. Elon Musk, when they were telling him that's what they did at Twitter, and we care about psychological safety, he looked at me and said, psychological safety, that's our enemy. We want a hardcore intensity. So people do it differently. But Jennifer Doudna, of course, is the person who I personally like the most, because not only is she a genius, not only has she changed our world, but she's a very nice person.
That's good to know. We could talk for hours, but everything is in the book. I feel all the different sides of Musk, the things that we touched upon, the things that we didn't have time for. I've read it. I have enjoyed it a lot. It gives me, as you say, all the crazy things he does now. I can kind of go back to what I have read in your biography and get a better understanding of it. Thank you very much for writing this book, and thank you even more for taking the time to talk with us. Thank you.
I'm glad I ran into you when I was having a wonderful time in Belgium a couple of weeks ago. And I'm so flattered that you invited me onto the show. Thank you for having me.
We were so happy that you wanted to do this. Thank you
so
and
much.
Thank you for the t-shirts.
Oh, you have
my Musk Skeptic one.
Yes, we gave you 2 T-shirts, Team Musk and Musk Skeptics. Have you used any of them yet?
I used them both. Yeah.
Really? If you can ever take a picture of Elon Musk in a Musk Skepsis T-shirt, we will send you all the Belgian beer that we can get our hands on.
I'm not sure that's good for my image or my equanimity, but I'll get some Belgian beer when I come back and see you next time.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
See you.
Thanks so
Bye-bye.
much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Die is gewoon echt en al en die praat
Dat is gewoon een
normaal.
imposante man. Die praat met zo'n gravitas. Dat is zo echt van, oh. En je ziet dat ook aan zijn gezicht dat hij er
Ik ging
geweest
me
is.
vragen van, hoe is dat...